very much, Richard. Under your leadership. And may I begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for so eloquently detailing the importance and urgency of this matter and the discussions that we're having today, and in doing so also congratulate the petitioners for organising such an important petition. I stand as the Member of Parliament for Ceredigion and Preseli, which at least half an hour ago was the constituency that has secured the highest number of signatories to this important petition. And as the Honourable Member opening the debate outlined, Wales also is one of the areas that has secured the highest concentration of signatories across the entirety of the UK. It will come as no surprise to anybody who just listened to the excellent speech of the Honourable Member opposite that the reason, I think, for this interest in Wales, this level of concern in Wales, is the antics and the treachery of the former leader of Reform UK in Wales, Mr Nathan Gill, who, as has already been mentioned, has been jailed for 10.5 years for accepting Russian bribes to the tune of some £40,000, making pro-Russian statements in the European Parliament, on media. The man has, I think, everybody will agree, committed treachery, and for £40,000 we must ask serious questions about his integrity and that of his party, who I notice are absent from today's discussions. Now, I would like to just make two very broad points, Mr Chairman. The first is just to explain why it is so important that we waste no time in implementing measures in response to the findings of the review that the Government has rightly called for and initiated. I understand that the review will look to report its findings in March, and I would plead with the Government Minister to ensure that the findings are acted upon as soon as possible, so as to preserve the integrity of our democracy. Sadly, it may not be possible to bring about any legislative changes in time for the elections that we'll have in Wales and in other parts of the UK in May of this year, but nevertheless it is important that we don't waste any time, and so that further elections are not in any way influenced by the scourge of Russian interference. I should also like to ask the Minister that as part of the review's considerations that we must look at some of the egregious loopholes in our current laws that the Russian state was able to exploit by funneling money through to political actors and traitors in the UK to their own ends. And one of the particular devices and mechanisms that I would very much like his reassurances that it's being examined are the creation of Welsh limited partnerships, something that a whole host of investigative journalists have written about in some detail, but something I would very much like to hear the Government state that they are looking at it, because these are devices that are created in Moscow, in Russia. They are then used to funnel money into our political discourse to political actors that try to interfere and influence our debates in malign ways, but doing so in a way that is very, very difficult for us to spot, at least not very easy for the Electoral Commission and other authorities to act on effectively. And I'll end my remarks, Mr Chair, by just perhaps reflecting on why this is so important. The Honourable Member outlined the whole host of ways that the Russian state is now trying to target and destabilise society and democracy in Western countries, but specifically in the UK. And we know, as the Honourable Member opposite in intervening, we shouldn't be naive in thinking that it is not happening here in the UK. I believe in June of last year, the Strategic Defence Review concluded that we are under daily attack. And I think that when we talk about political interference, whether that's Russian, Iranian or Chinese for that matter, we should place it against the broader context of other hybrid warfare tactics. The Honourable Member referenced a number of them, but I do think that we need to consider the fact that whilst they are perhaps flooding our social medias with disinformation generated by armies of bots, or indeed directly trying to bribe some willing fools in our political environment, they are also then paving the way of undermining and corroding trust in political institutions and authorities in such a way that then makes us even more vulnerable to the very direct attacks that they may launch, whether that is the terrible poisonings in Salisbury back in 2018, the arson attack back in 2024, or indeed the almost constant daily threat that these mysterious Russian research ships pose to our critical subsea infrastructure. The point I would make in closing, Mr. Chair, is that by allowing political interference to continue, we risk undermining the public's trust in all of our institutions, indeed undermining trust in the very integrity of our politics. We need to perhaps wake up in this country to the nature of the threat, that it is all-encompassing, it is comprehensive. And so every single tier of government, every tier of society needs to be engaged, and perhaps a national conversation, actually, about the seriousness of the threat should be initiated. And I think the government's, the findings of the government's review perhaps is a good opportunity upon which we can trigger that national conversation. But I'll end, Mr. Chair, by just saying that we cannot waste any time, once the review has issued its findings, to bring forward, whether they are legislative or indeed budgetary measures that need to be undertaken to protect the integrity of our democracy and to tackle the scourge of Russian interference in our politics.